3-eye atlas and the space between peace and war. Now, peace is something that is a resolve, something that we conclude to say, let's make peace with something, and peace generally comes from war or something that is causing an issue in the first place. Let's be peaceful, which would suggest that there is also always something to resolve to create even the word peace. And so with 3-eye atlas, we would say it sits in the space between peace and war. What do I mean by that? I mean, I've done a first video for this, right? And I wanted to take some time to observe things that were taking place when in the month of November, and the themes that took place in the month of November. And as we know, November was very heavy. There was a lot of things happening. And I wanted to make an overall conclusion as opposed to like pinpointing everything. What does this all mean? Now, outside of all the things that we discussed in the first video of 3-eye atlas, the idea of what we understand to be war, because generally when we think about war, we think of like fighting and, weaponry and all this kind of stuff. But perhaps the art of war is much different now, softer, quieter, sophisticated even. Winning without battle or destruction. Now, a lot of people were afraid of this new entity coming through the sky that we have now decided to call 3-eye atlas. What's going on? What is this thing? Why is it here? Anunnaki, invisible people, downloaded of consciousness, blah, 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 blah. And albeit now, and I think this might be a running theme throughout the video, is awareness. Awareness and learning the skill of symbolism. I think that's been lost so far gone. If you're new here, many of my older videos and those who have been here, there is an understanding that these stories are telling the humans, the ones that are left behind, hey, I hope they get the clues. And much of the time, the skies have been moving around and people have connected stories or myths to help us remember what we need to do or how we need to read the skies. And so when we talk about 3-eye atlas, and I will go more into this to give more examples so it doesn't sound too whimsical. When we think about where I've alluded to this idea of war, but in a more subtle way, we have war with ourselves that we would hopefully try to make peace with. We have war in terms of organized war, like technology. There's so many ways that war is now done. Hey, we can't, destroy everything because those are our assets. We can't work like that anymore because that is silly. We've built up, this city. We've built the city with rock and roll. We've built it up so many ways. Why would we destroy it just so that we can get like some end result of peace or end result of obtaining something? Nah, let's do it another way. And so where we have this here, this is a huge symbolism. Let's look at quickly. Everybody understands the story of Jesus. The 3 wise men, or the Star of Bethlehem. And astrologically, many people said, well, in fact, Jesus wasn't born in December or wasn't born on January 25th. Based on the Great Conjunction. What is a Great Conjunction? Well, a Great Conjunction is usually a alignment with when 2 planets are come together. Jupiter and Saturn. There are many other conjunctions, but Jupiter and Saturn, I guess in myth, right, to make it easier to digest, is that this is a sign that someone significant is going to be born. Something is going to change the course of the world. And they did this by looking at the stars. Now, some people say the Star of Bethlehem could have been the Sirius Dog Star, which is the brightest star, or was brighter than the sun at one point. Or arguably it still is, but it's more mythology that's kind of like changed the narrative. However it's seen, stories are connected to how we read the sky and how we need to understand the sky. So with 3i Atlas coming in, and we're going to discuss more about even how it came into the constellation of Sagittarius and what that means symbolically, this creates a new idea. In my first video, I alluded it to the idea of like a head teacher patrolling the corridors, seeing what's happening, checking in. Hey, is everyone behaving, you know? And I'll still stick with that. There is like a surveillance in a way. And so, because I've done so much already in terms of 3i Atlas on a whole scale, we're going to look at the updates from the time I did the first video to now. Now, this idea of dust, that it's producing dust particles that are significant to note down. And I was always thinking to myself, this idea of dust, or the idea of air, Kronos, this or Uranus, this idea of the air passing through information or things being passed through. And we know, 2020, we know very well that things can be contaminated in the sky, and the profuse washing of hands and covering of faces is what our solution was in that time of war with the sky. And so when we think of 3i Atlas and this understanding of dust, I found it very interesting. I said, what does that mean for us? What is that trying to tell us? That one, it's going at a high velocity. It's cutting through all the orbits. It's not being sucked in any way, shape, or form. It's going on its own route. So there's something mightier here that says this is coming from a very cosmic space. Now, I'm not here to kind of change anybody's mind, but have another perspective of thought, and again, a level of awareness. So, types of war: resource control, ideology, religion, power struggles. I think it's fair to say that this has played a lot, even from 2020 to now. But we also understand that time changes things. And these resets, whether they're hard resets or soft resets, is like a type of war with our consciousness, with our mind. I remember there was a time where I can't remember the name of the show, but it was always showing all the innovative stuff that was taking place when it comes to technology and the new age. And they were like, yeah, everyone's going to be listening to music digitally, and we're going to have things called USB sticks. And I was like, no way. I've got my Discman. I've got, what else is there? I've got my CDs. What do you mean? So what would I do with my CDs? Because slowly we saw the CD players or stereos no longer, they're being phased out. They're not even in the shops anymore. So you're seeing these changes and shifts, and mentally you're like, I've understood this to be true. So then there's a mental battle, aka war, with self about these new changes. Why? Why is this happening? Now, I think to help understand how 3A Atlas could be a symbol of change, but in a way that is it's not scary. It's more like a promise. So let's look at the Star of Bethlehem, because we all know the story of Jesus, okay, and the three wise men. And we all understand, hopefully, and if you don't know, I'm going to briefly explain. And the idea of Jesus, or the idea of when somebody, a king, is going to be born, they looked at the skies for indication of something significant happening on earth. Much like where the movement of Pleiades and then Orion's coming straight after, and they use stories to depict that. It's the same way in terms of the Star of Bethlehem, which sometimes they see as the dog star or the brightest star, was in alignment with the sun, which does make a play on the main sun and a smaller sun aligned together. And then you had the great conjunction, which was Jupiter and Saturn. And that great conjunction, these three wise men had said, a king will be born. And so with that idea of knowing that something is about to happen, we can then, because some people see this story of Bethlehem or Jesus as a story, right? It's symbolism. So we are going to use real life examples about what we have in our lifetime. Everyone watching this will know that there are some symbologies in terms of these great conjunctions or conjunctions astrologically or astronomically, however you want to see it, that indicate some shift is happening, and whether it's a hard reset or it's a soft reset. So I feel here where time has moved so quickly, we've seen so many eclipses, so many supermoons, and there was a time where it was actually an iconic event. Now there's just so much happening at a given time. You're like, oh my gosh, how many more moons? What is going on here? And so if we see the sky as an interface of telling us messages, right? Okay, being whimsical again, telling us messages, then what is it telling us? Because a lot of the time when we think of these things, we think something is coming. Something is either coming to save us, something is coming to destroy us, something is going to do something to us, when really a lot of it is a shift in consciousness. And that can be a very troublesome thing to change. Now let's have a look at 2000 to 2012. The shift in change was, I guess, telecommunications, going from analog to digital. Music was shifting as well, very small, but shifting. The type of style of music was slowly being implemented. But the idea of analog to digital and this administration shift, this meant that there was a lot of breakdown in terms of work, bankers, everything was just crumbling. And that took 12 years to do. So in terms of the state of consciousness that we were in a very simple stage in our lives. Okay, there was a lot of simplistic things that we did. We still played games that had pixels. Okay, very simplistic times. And that took us 12 years, from 2000 to 2012, to really sit into this digital world. Because even the phones or mobile phones were still, they didn't have color. It was only starting to introduce slowly this idea of color. The cameras were getting better. And so oftentimes when it comes to things like design, and I will talk more about design because those are really good indicators about where we are headed and what is in plan for us. Because let's be fair, when the designers, engineers, architects, they've already got an idea of what the world's going to look like in the next 20, 30 years. They're time traveling already. And we're just kind of existing in the old world, let's say. And now when we look at, so that was 12 years. So then we have 2012 to 2020. And that was 8 years. So the time frame before, like with different changes across time, the time frame is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Then you have 2020 to 2026. This is now 6 years. And in between those years, again, it's getting smaller again. So we could then say in 1 year's time, let's say 2026 to 2027, there's another change again. But we are now putting in place the new world, the new era. And this probably arguably has been planned for a very long time. And we are just kind of getting the end of it. I always like to think like we right now, we have the latest phone, latest gadget, but they're already planning and making something for the next 10 years. They've already preempted everything. So again, it's more about awareness. The 3i Atlas is a phenomenal scenario that's happened this year, amongst everything. I alluded to this idea of where it spoke about dust. When we think about how we understood particles in the sky, our interaction with the sky in 2020, and how much as we were dealing with some sort of pandemic, we were also dealing with a change of structure. You know, work from home wasn't a thing, and now it's a thing. And everyone's kind of wriggling it around. Well, we did work from home. Do we like it? Well, we're paying the bills for this work building, this office, and nobody's here. What's the point? Okay, we need to restructure again. So everyone's kind of like fine-tuning things. But they understood that people were like, no, like we want to work 4 days. We don't want to work 5 days. Everybody's well-being was starting to be more impacted. Like, I want to look after myself. I don't want to work like this. What? For why? For what? And so us protecting ourselves from the elements, from breathing in whatever was in the skies at the time, was very interesting to me. This idea of the things that you cannot see impacting you in a way. And we know about viral things that happen in the air. You know, all of us can get sick or whatever. But COVID, I don't even like to say that word because we'll start flagging things. But like it's one of those things where this idea of particles in the sky, and even in those particles, there are like microorganisms, real living things interacting with our bodies and sending us messages. And this is just my whimsical thought, this idea of dust on this atlas and what it's trying to symbolically say, that there is a new way and people are going to be accelerated much faster in their thinking. Much like this time frame I've given, is like the change is more like this from 2000 to 2012 had to happen. That long scale of like indoctrination of new ways of doing things, that had to be 12 years. And then now we've gone the initiation stage. We're now putting in the next phase, which that is easier. It's easier to implement the next stage. And then the last 5 years or so, now we're implementing something else. So now from 2025 onwards, this is a new thing. And I think this is where 2026, 2027 becomes more like a ceiling of new ways of how the next 3-4 years after that is going to play out. So it's not a surprise, right? Where there all these kind of changing of power and changing of ideas of what no longer fits anymore. But we'll talk more about that later astrologically, what's happening in 2026. But yes, this idea of dust. You know, I was thinking of The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman, and this idea of dust. And the concept was that the dust is consciousness interacting with matter. I call it time space. and they depicted it as like the church feared dust, and dust only gathers around adults. To those, it doesn't gather around innocents. So even though it's a fictional story, this idea of consciousness or interaction or communication in the air, when we think of, even on a mythological level, when we're thinking of Uranus, or the beginners of time, Uranus as the sky, Gaia as the earth, and the themes that have played out symbolically, it could be said that there's this idea that we are, even when we're uttering words into existence, we are speaking to the sky, we're speaking to the heavens, And so yes, I thought this idea was very interesting. Or that's what came to my mind when I thought of this idea of dust when it came to Three Eye Atlas. And so we understand the theory of the 369, which are the numbers of the universe, right? And what phase we're at. And I would say that we're still in pregnancy stage. And this download or birthing is, in the next couple of years, like 26, 27. And, pregnancy, or they call it labor, literally, because you go through so much through that process. It's you birth something, but the change and the shift can be kind of warlike. But it's a battle that is, or winning battle without destruction. And destruction looks a bit different. Destruction is softer. It's not extreme violence. And I would say more in the Western Hemisphere. Let's just be clear. We are not ignoring that there are some real heinous things happening. So there's like a mix or a soup of different ideas of war putting together. It's like, and this is in addition to everything else that's being compiled. And even the way that we understand trying to change, whether it's resource control, ideology, religion, or power struggles, how that is being implemented now. And so, what have I written here? Humanity has reached a level of surveillance, seeing things more clearly in the sky. And I love it. I love the idea that we are noticing things a lot more, that people are more open to new ways of thought. I think not too long ago, it was more like, I believe this, and this is what I believe in. I don't want to read anything else. I don't want to know anything else because, and there was a fear behind it, because it was like, if I do that, then I'm going to question myself and then question my existence. I don't want to do that. I just want to live this very, neutral, linear perspective. And that's not me throwing any shade. It's just more like, it's safe here. I like it here. Don't try and inject nothing new. Sorry. But what I'm seeing now, and I think this is because of 2020 and this kind of huge disruption, that we have this like, this kind of porousness about us. Like we're wanting to receive this new information. Like, yeah, tell me more. What else is happening? And hopefully, that you're looking at the skies a lot more and reading the skies and seeing what information is showing symbolically. And yes. And I was going to make some observations in terms of the last two, I guess they call them comets, the Oumuamua and the Borisov. These guys. They came up very prominent times as well. I think one came in 2017 and one in 2019. And 2019 makes sense. 2017, interesting. Maybe it's prep time. I didn't do much research astrologically on these, but I just thought I would put it here, just to allow you to have some time to think about it or do some research on it if you must. I'm just looking at my notes. So dust is the apple of Adam. I think this is my theory. This is my theory. So in terms of symbology, like when we think of the apple was something that was forbidden. You wasn't supposed to eat it, but the apple can be seen as knowledge, enlightenment. And again, sometimes you don't want to know. Sometimes it's just safer just to be in a nice space, especially if you was born into a certain ideology. It's safe, it's cultural, it's comforting. But when you gain information, which I'm calling dust at this point, is you gain self-awareness. Oh, what's happening here? You gain curiosity, you gain experience. Is this evil? Absolutely not. And I like the idea of dust by this Subtle Nice by Philip Pullman, because it was challenging. First, it was challenging the ideas of the church, because at that time, at the period that it was written, they had the most say, they dictated, they had the most power. And it frightened them because they didn't understand what it was doing and they couldn't contain it. Sounds very familiar to this. They don't know what this is. They're trying to squeeze it in to say it's a comet, but it's not a comet. But it's as close as possible. But the way it's moving and how it, it's reacting, and the things that are coming off of it, it's unlike anything. But they characterize it to say, okay, it's 3i. We had 2i, we had 1i, and now we have 3i. Okay, guys, look, they're going to do the best that they can. We are in a world of structure and form. So if that's what they can do and bend it into this idea, this is almost like a very rebellious, and it's nice. It's nice to say, okay, you thought that you could create all these boxes and tick boxes, and here this comes and says, yeah, where are you going to put me now? Where are you going to put me now, mate? Oh, you can't put me anywhere. Oh, you're going to try. Okay. So this idea of gaining new knowledge or things changing and shifting, this could give symbolically an idea that there are ideas that we used to have that made sense to us, that made us feel comfortable. And there is a change here that says, no, what you understood is going to look different now. What you thought was the rules, you can't categorize it as a comet. You can't categorize it as whatever the categories were incepted as at the beginning of time, or whenever things were categorized as. You cannot do that anymore. And I think symbolically, that's what the 3i Atlas is saying. It's saying it's older than the sun. So it's older than time and space itself. If we're thinking of it from a methodological perspective of when Cronus made the sky and the heavens and the earth and the waters and such. It's before that. It's the time of the beginning. It's the time of Gaia. It's the time of Uranus, ruler of the sky. Like, it's a time of that. It's very fascinating stuff. So I guess we're going to look forward to in 2026 is things are not going to be quite the same. And some people have seen it as an inversion. The people that are maybe how you saw people, there's a new shift of power, and how we understood power, what that looks like to us categorically, is not going to look like that anymore. And it's like, hey, just letting you know that just because you think you can categorize things always change. And that's been doing that for time. When we think about mythology, there's always something trumping out something, trumping out something, trumping out something. And speaking of Trump, he's a very, very interesting archetype. And we'll briefly discuss him because he was very, very poignant in terms of astrology when we talk about this, even this year alone, and where he plays his part in this whole thing. So let's look more over here, right? Fear of the reset or fear of the apocalypse. And looking at resets as more of a shift in consciousness. There are going to be some people that are going to be okay with it, some people who are not. And, or shift of mindset. You know, some words sometimes they get so caught up in hype. When you say consciousness, just it kind of gives a kind of like, oh gosh, one of them spiritual people. And it's like, okay, so sometimes I will just change words just so that it just takes the edge off of that kind of like saturation of like noise. So earlier layers took longer due to belief systems being much harder to change, but 2020 accelerated this. Microcycles replacing long cycles. And so this is where 2026 changes, big changes, because we've already seen themes of that in 2025. There's a lot of things happening. And I'm sure you're being aware of what those things are. And it's going to be different for different people, even in your own personal lives. There's going to be shifts and changes that you're almost like, what is going on right now? Then I said films like Akira felt prophetic, but was noticing patterns and imagining the potential of what is in its present sense. Now, Akira was written in, I believe, the early 1980s. And they depicted 2019 as this, it was based on Japan, but like this idea of kind of collapse and some sort of a fall. And maybe they looked at it astrologically because 2019 did have some themes of that. But when we see, and I speak about Akira because it was quite profound that we were now living in a time that someone preempted like years ago. And even though there were some overlaps in terms of how we're understanding technology, there were some things that are a bit like, oh, okay, that doesn't make sense or that doesn't work. But the idea that they tasked themselves with using their imagination to create something that they could preempt what that could look like, I feel like this is the whole point. And I think even for next 2026, especially with these kind of major placements going into certain constellations, it's kind of giving that again, this idea of using the imagination once more. And we have a catalogue of things or presidencies to kind of work off of that, especially if we're stuck with our imagination. But I think, again, with the idea of just how things are going at like warp speed, I don't think that's really going to be a main issue. But yes, awareness is time travel. What does X look like in 50 years? Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about awareness because these things are happening. It's being aware that it's like, okay, there's not much that you can do to change certain things. And from time to time, yes, you can pitch your words, you can use social media to kind of fight back. But sometimes some things they just are, you know? And I say awareness is time travel, not in a sense of like Back to the Future, but in a sense of like looking at patterns, looking at what has placed. There are spaces that are literally have been planned for the next 50 years. If we think now, what is being hinted to us? Sustainability, environment, technology, health, these kind of factors that are coming in over and over again. Cleaner air, this stuff is becoming closer. Before they were talking about, eco stuff, but it's becoming more prominent, especially from 2020. It's like, yeah, there's something about, and you're thinking, what is it? Why is this huge emphasis? And I was like, oh, God, possibly the adults that are going to be the generation or the consciousness of, or the generation that was born like Pluto in Sagittarius. they're going to be more spoken about things. They're going to be more like, hey, we don't like this and we don't like that. They're not gonna be okay with a lot of things. So they're like, okay, how do we understand the new age? We know we need digital elements because 9 times out of 10 their head is in their screens. So how are we going to create spaces that accommodate these things? How are we going to create spaces between spaces to accommodate well-being? And that shapes our consciousness, but it shapes the world around us. And therefore, when you look up from your phones, you realize what was in 2019 isn't what is going to happen in the next 2-3 years. And we've seen that when it comes to 2020. We've seen, companies changing, shifting, some coming back even this year, right? That wasn't back before, that was like laying low for a while. All of these are like very symbolic, very, very timely as well. I think it was Topshop I'm alluding to. And so, yeah, like I think the whole process is just not like, oh, buckle up, like you're ready to go on like some roller coaster. Maybe not. But more like, okay, I'm going on a roller coaster. Okay, I know it's going to be fast. I know that I need to keep my legs and arms inside. Okay, let's go, kind of thing, As well as like, oh my gosh, no, don't put me on that thing. And that's where I think we're headed. And I think 3i Atlas is just a symbolic aspect of change is here. And we're going to allude it to whatever fits our narrative. But it's just being aware of what those changes are, because some of them are going to be outside of our control, and it just is. So I did a little comparison. Like in my first 3i Atlas video, I go in much deeper with the overlap between Mercury retrograde. But like, I feel like it's necessary now to kind of look at, firstly, the July 1st, where it was first noted, going through the constellation of Sagittarius / Ophiuchus. I hope I'm saying that right. And even that is very interesting. When we think of the Hermetic or Platonic principles about how consciousness works and how it enters and where it goes, and how the whole kind of conveyor belt of how we come to be, or even how we understand our sun, moon, and rising. So the fact that it came from, and I'll speak about this more, but like the fact that it came through from the constellation of this area, which is sometimes called the gates of God, it would also add that layer that 3i Atlas is coming from like a very special place. It's not it's not a random, that mythology has literally, like, across cultures, across cosmologies, they're saying that part of the sky is the sun, the gates of God or gods. But we'll leave that there because we're going to talk about that in the next page. So then November 15th is 3i Atlas moves through Virgo, Leo constellations, and always in between those constellations. And what I wanted to also do is add the themes that were happening around that time. Just being a bit whimsical, okay? It's not anything that is, foolproof or whatever. But it does hold something, right? So when we understand Virgo likes to fix things. It kind of can put things in order, right? It's kind of like the cleanup crew, I'd like to say. If you want something done, you get a Virgo because they're going to get it done. They're probably going to complain, but they're going to get it done. And Leo likes to get things done as well, but let's make it classy. Let's make it nice. Where's the lights? Where's the camera? Where's the action? Because I want to be seen. And so here, the November the 15th, or on and around that time, we had things resurfacing, right? Narratives that were lost, being brought back. What was it? That plane crash. I think I've written my notes somewhere. There was a plane that went missing, and then all of a sudden we're like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go and find it again. I was like, what? Now I don't know if it, in fact it was specifically that date. Maybe it was a bit later, maybe more in December time. But if I just kind of try to categorize it as much as possible, but yeah, I guess in this day and age, categorizing things is not so straightforward. So unresolved narratives, things that have been unjust for so long that people are now bringing to the surface and say, hey, look, let me tell you the truth about this. And everyone's like, what? No way, you know? I think it was Malaysia Airlines, and there was a missing plane, yeah. And there's a new search for the missing plane. Lots of things. There's been earthquakes, there's been fires, but we know that across time, there's been earthquakes, there's been fires, but it's the time frame that is coming in. It's coming in so fast and heavy. Now, this could be argued that our technology is much better, so that we're more connected to matters and affairs of the world. But I feel like in terms of the change of consciousness between these times, it's evident that the time space between how we change our thought processes is becoming, the changes developing quicker and quicker and quicker. So December 1st, again, the constellation of still in Virgo Leo cusp. Talks of biological tech, whether it's your phones or your watches or whatever. There's this idea of like the digital twin, like you are going to have a digital self, which we kind of already have, but like it's going to be more imposed. Surveillance normalized, you know, this idea of like, oh my gosh, people are looking through the screens, or oh, people are saying this, or oh, algorithm. There's going to be a more like, okay, this is happening now. We'll see, right? And we know that this is coming in the Virgo Leo, so we're looking at symbology. We're looking at symbolic aspects of it. And I actually like the fact that symbolically it's in Virgo and Leo, because Virgo is going to stabilize a lot of what Leo would try and exaggerate, let's say. But the exaggeration is good because it allows exposure and it allows a reset. Leo is fire. It's kind of break things down if it needs to, because when Leo is not happy and it's angry, this is problematic. Pluto in Leo was a very, very evident of the period of time where war and Hollywood or cinematic expression was aligning at the same time. So that's why I kind of saw this idea of like, yeah, biological tech, but like there could be another side to it, right? And again, the new significant placements astrologically for the next year is going to be very prominent and very telling about where this could go. December 15th, then throughout Atlas moves through the constellation fully into Leo. And there are literal fires, which fires symbolically signify a reset. And water symbolically represents relocation. Keeping the same information but moving it to another space or dispositioning. Maybe a bit of confusion a little bit. But yeah, so we got this, yeah. And so with December 19th, which becomes the closest visibility of 3i Atlas, which is again still in Leo, we can then look at things like exchanges of just exchanges. I think across the story when it comes to 2025, things are changing. Those streamers are bigger than the Hollywood celebrities. So that's a big deal in terms of media and who has control over the attention of a group or a demographic, or let's say the Plutonian consciousness for that, like Generation Z, I think they are, like, or not Generation Z, Generation Alpha, right? So a lot of them have got that demographic locked in when it comes to streaming, and these notable individuals are much bigger. And so now we start to understand how powerful attention is, even biblically. Like, hey, don't worship that God, worship this God. No, too much of the attention, they're worshiping Baal again. No, what? The idea of collective attention and its power is more prominent now than ever. And so even platform media exchange, what's happening with Warner Bros. And Netflix, it's a big deal. Because then it's saying, no, there's a change that's happening. We already preempted with the data that we have. We already know, and we're preparing for Generation Alpha. I know you guys are doing your thing, but we are preparing for the new consciousness that is going to be the main drive for economy, etc., etc. And so even at this point in time, everyone's scared, like, hey, what's happening? But it's happening, right? Amongst other things. But this changing, I'm calling it the changing of keys, but it's just like, I don't know, like, hey, I've been here for a while. Here's the keys. I don't live here anymore. And somebody else lives here now. It's kind of like that. So then we go forward into December 20th to 25th. I'm just preempting some more like religious narratives or things being noted, because it's still in Leo. This idea, or the constellation of where 3-hour Atlas is going to be in Leo. This idea of exposure, but also glamour, and but exposure more than anything, is going to be playing quite heavily around this period of time. But let's look more into this area of the 20th, because when we think of the sun and we think of the solstice, where the sun is standing still or is still, from the 21st to the 25th of December, this is very iconic. Some people allude this to the idea of this pagan idea of overlapping and using the Jesus story for, this is Jesus's birthday, which when we look at what the wise men were saying, it more closely directs to Jesus probably was a Pisces and was born in February, like that kind of thing. So interesting. But this period of time, when we're thinking of literally the sun in the sky at its lowest point, it says a lot of things. We can look at this symbolically. Yesterday, I was out and I saw the sun, but it was so foggy that it just looks very peculiar to me. I was like, I've never seen the sun in that light before. It's kind of shining, but it's a foggy shine, like, and I was like, okay, symbolically, how can I look at that, And I think when it comes to the stillness of the sky or stillness of the sun, and what the sun presents to us in terms of nourishment, in terms of giving life, is in a very different space. And some people allude the story or the resurrection of Jesus, or when Jesus goes to Hades, or he goes to hell and comes back up again. It's the sun does the same thing between the 21st and the 25th of December. And this idea of crucifixion is kind of alludes to this idea. I think it's the constellation, or the constellation of the cross, or the crux of where the sun lies in terms of astronomically, right? And I think this is really powerful And I just kind of thought this is a really a religious portal or a religious moment in time that we are going to maybe learn some things when it comes to so maybe we'll see things about the church, we don't know, but like, or maybe because again Leo is about exposure, right? But it's on my side of the hemisphere, it's very foggy and the sun is still showing through, so it's almost like maybe even something being hidden, but there's still things are going to be illuminated. So we know around this time, this is the time where it's very potent, whether it's family or we're going to, family spaces. It's very focused on family, and it's not for everybody, but that's what's been marketed, right? And maybe there's something, the fact that Three-eyed Atlas is coming through the constellation of Leo, again being whimsical, just making sure you guys know that's what I'm doing. That there is exposure, right? There is exposure. Even it's like, okay, you can try and fog me out, mate, but sorry, I'm gonna say what I need to say. I'm gonna do what I need to do. And maybe there's a lot of understanding or even remorse, even like people saying, you know what? Yeah, that was wrong. Yeah, I don't like that. No, it's okay. You're right. Maybe there's going to be more retrospect and truth on a smaller scale, on a personal scale, perhaps. And I think that has helped when we think about technology and how technology tells stories to us about our world, about dynamics in family dynamics or friendship dynamics, whatever. We're learning so much at such a speed that the idea of retrospect is now it's not too far gone for people to sit down and say, actually, yeah, that wasn't okay. That wasn't okay, Therapy in a bottle, therapy on a screen. But yes, so let's continue some more. So before I was mentioning about Sagittarius and so here I've kind of done an imagery of a loose imagery of the hermetic principles of the gates of consciousness, or how we begin, or how we come to be in terms of this world, how our consciousness, because our body is one thing, our consciousness is another thing, and how that is developed. And the idea is that you descend to ascend once again, like Jacob's ladder. You're climbing through the different phases of Pleiades, or the seven planets, right? And learning lessons through those processes. And so Three-eyed Atlas came from this area, the galactic center, and the constellation of Sagittarius and Ophiuchus, which is a teacher space, or it defines us. We're the 13th planet. And Atlas goes through the Golden Gate, which is the idea of it is like the gate of God, or the Tropic of Capricorn. Didn't even finish it. The Tropic of Capricorn, about structure, form. So it's structuring and forming the consciousness before it can get to and initiating it. So then we get through the sun, which is identity, our self. So that's why our sun sign is the most important to how we understand our what part or what time we were when the sun was moving, and what does that represent to us. And then it goes through into the moon, and then the moon conscious, that's our moon sign, and then it goes into the earth, and then we rise up through the earth, and that's our rising. So even astrologically, this idea, when we come to the Three-eyed Atlas and how it's moving through, even from this part of the sky, part of the galaxy, it's saying a lot of things. It's saying it's ancient. It's saying that it's coming from a very godly higher self, or a higher sense. And it's here to come and teach. It's here to learn something, just like we are learning something throughout our descent, and we're going to ascend again. I guess 3i Atlas is doing the same thing, but learning and taking information, writing notes along the way. Again, I'm being very theoretical about things. In theory, that's where we could look at it. But, we can look at so many different areas of, even astrologically, what the themes were telling us before 3i Atlas came into surface. That says something is happening. And so when what I want to do briefly, I wanted to look at the periods of time when we talk about the conjunction. Earlier, I spoke about the Star of Bethlehem and the idea around symbolically looking at what they were alluding to when they're looking at the sky. It's almost like an interface that is reading and saying, okay, it's telling us a story. Can we decode the story? And many people have done myth and legends to kind of depict that. And sometimes I think the myths and legends have gained more superiority than the symbols itself, right? And what it was trying to aim for. Let's go all back into time. Let's go all the way back to the year 2000. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to look at conjunctions and the different types. So you have planetary alignments or a planet parade. Now, these times, it's giving the illusion of planets looking like it's lined up on the sun's path or the ecliptic. And I've alluded this to a soft reset. I'm talking about reset or consciousness reset or changes. Then we have versus the conjunction or the great or grand conjunction, which will always and only be a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. And this is where it's a tight, they're very close to, we're not very close to each other, but they're close to each other, right? This, anytime a great conjunction happens, it's a hard reset. This is why the symbology around Jesus was so profound in terms of astrologically, because it's saying a king will be born. And look how Jesus, even the name of Jesus, how powerful it is. And the stories, everything is powerful, even up till now. So this would then suggest that there are some things about different types of conjunctions in the sky that is telling us a story. And it's for us to try and understand what that is being told. And this discourse that we're having is great. Whether it's on whatever social media platform, this is great. That's the whole point, is to expand the mind, because things are going at warp speed. There's no one going to be left behind per se. I mean, I think at this point, if you really just want to stay in one mindset, at this point, if you want to, okay, but the ship is going, Then you have multi-planet conjunction. Now, the multi-planet conjunction is an extra layer between planetary alignment or planet parade and the great conjunction. So you could have a planetary alignment or planet parade with a multi-planet conjunction, and the same you can have with a great conjunction you could have with a multi-planet conjunction. And multi-planet conjunction is when 7 or more planets occupy one sign. That's one constellation. So let's say if all the planets. So when with the idea of Jesus, the great conjunction, I think there were other planets, but mainly because Jupiter and Saturn were together, because that's the rule of the Great Conjunction, was in the constellation of Pisces. So and this is why it was like, maybe it strongly suggests that Jesus was not born on December 25th and is actually looking up towards the solstice. And when it remains still between, and the 21st to 25th is 3 days, right? And there's the story of like 3 days, he rose again after 3 days and things like this. It's the sun, literally. But hey, we all have to, I think it's all about just being aware whatever you want to do, you could do whatever you want. But as long as you have information, I think there was a day and time where you just had to learn one way of thinking. And that has changed now because we are so connected. Technology won't allow it. It won't allow it, So it's just being aware. That's the long and short of it. And I said multi-planet conjunction is, am I doing this right? Okay, for the vibes, right? It's for it intensifies the narrative. It's like a side quest, like when you read a book and you've got the little animated characters at the corner of the book and you flick it and it's like it's doing something fun, right? It is the side quest of any planetary alignment happening at the time. So let's go back to 2000. Some of you may have just been born. Some of you may have just been going to college. Some of you were still in primary school. Either way, think back to 2000. The 7-planet alignment in Taurus. What was happening around that time? Well, 2000 was the new age. We were going from analog to digital. There was shifts. There were the way that we were communicating, a way that even data was being handled had changed. We were having to move certain systems or software or storage to a different style of storage, different way we're handling data. And so this was a great conjunction. Again, great conjunction is a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. But this had a 7 planets. So it had other planets like Mars, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and the Moon. So there was a lot of things happening. This is a very rare movement. So like I said before, 2000 was the beginning of a new change, and it took us about 12 years to really settle in to the new phones, to how we listen to music, how we deal with mail, email. It's different. Everything was changing. Even music, right? Everything was changing. And so there's that. Then March 2020 is another great conjunction. What was happening in March in 2020? So as we know, that's when everything went to hell. That's when everybody paused and said, stay inside your homes. This is not a drill. Wash your hands profusely. Cover your face, everybody. And so hopefully you're seeing the themes of some really hard resets. That's why I've decided to call them hard resets. And so the systems of a Saturn, Pluto. Pluto is in systems, turning them over. Saturn, in terms of authority. This was, and on top of that, it was in the constellation of Capricorn. Then later, Jupiter and Mars created a tight stellium. So again, the rules. Jupiter and Saturn are in the building. And it's in the constellation of Capricorn. So that was definitely felt, wasn't it, ladies and gentlemen? We felt 2020. We felt March of 2020 hard. And yeah. Whether it's Pluto and its conspiracy theories and Saturn with its structure and control, put them two together and things are getting thrown about and trying to patch the pieces, but it's not working. So, and then Jupiter and Mars comes in. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Mars is the one that wants to break things as well. We destroying things? Okay, let me go. Let me bring my guys to keep this going. And then Jupiter seeing expansion. Okay, all right, what opportunities, as things are already going haywire, what opportunities can we have here to change things for the better, change things for the good? I have to be here because if I'm not here, I don't know what's going to take place. And so that was March 2020. Great conjunction. Now, the next themes, we go all the way back or all the way to present day. Now, in February 28th, 2025, there was also another 7-planet stellium. Now, this is different. It's not as harsh. This is different. This was a planet parade. It was given the illusion that things were lining up. It's a bit more of a spectacle, but it's still a reset, soft reset, you know? And I noted some things that were happening there. And the thing that was most notable was the TikTok ban negotiation, which I could start to think to myself, I wonder when we have these planetary planet parades or planetary alignments that maybe we could start alluding this to, we shouldn't be fearful of when scenarios or things happen around this time because this is an illusion. It's not, what you see is not what you get. So maybe we invert it and say, okay, there's a TikTok ban. There's not actually a ban, which we can see now. There wasn't a ban. And what actually was happening was a changing of power. Hey, guys, we don't know. This company has way too much power and they have all our data from people in our country. Yeah, we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to look into that. That's not going to happen, you know? And so that was changed. Then not so long after, we have March 29th to 30th, right? And this was a Pisces conjunction. So this would be the multi-planet conjunction. This is like the extra layer. But this is more about how, so it's an illusion, but then it still has extra emphasis about what is being intensified in this. So it's kind of like a temporary thing. So because it's in Pisces, Pisces is very powerful. It's spiritual. It's emotional. And the things that were happening, there was a protest against the Trump administration. That, if you remember, Trump was definitely working very fast and very quickly. And the judges had to be like, work as just as quick just to get this, whatever narrative he was trying to play out, stop it. Now, again, with these illusions, maybe there's an inversion happening here. Maybe what we see is not what's really happening, right? Well, we are yet to really understand the whole Trump thing because right now he is a very interesting character. That's all I can say. And if he keeps playing this narrative and he keeps coming under these kind of soft resets, we don't need to be heavily, like, not concerned, but like, we can be aware and say, we know that whatever he does, there's always going to be pushback in some way, shape or form. But it's going to expose illusions. It's going to expose things that maybe we didn't see before, we didn't understand before. And that whatever he exposes in that pushback is what we are learning from that. So whether it's, I think the other day where it's like, hey, these guys, they're pushing words into my mouth and like, they're saying, they're letting me say things that I didn't really say. Now, even though what he's saying is valid, despite all the things he does say, what he's saying is valid, right? The idea, we swipe it back. We can say, okay, technology is being used to create narratives, which we already know. But the fact that they're using someone who's someone's the president, right? To that degree. So then what more could be done to everybody else? This is where we can highlight how far people will go with using technology for good or for bad. And so this idea between this Trump and his views or whatever's happening and the TikTok ban are very heavily connected with the themes that are taking place in terms of technology, in terms of surveillance, in terms of ethics. These things are very, very strong here. And did I say, okay, on January 19th, this is the start of this year, Donald Trump's inauguration happened around the 6-planet alignment. But again, this is a soft reset. It's more of a parade, so to speak. And this was a 6-planet alignment, along with the TikTok ban initiated around that time. So yeah, I just wanted to put that there because when we're thinking about how we look at the skies, we look at our phone, we look at these interfaces to give us the time, to give us, hey, look, your energy levels are low or whatever it is, right? But the oldest interface is the skies. And I think we've lost the art of imagination because we've been leaning so heavily on digital stuff, I guess. But that's something to consider, right? This idea that every time there are some great conjunctions or stelliums or alignments, something is happening, but what is it trying to tell us? And that's all it's just being aware. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't, just being aware. The sky is one thing your eyeballs, you can see the sky. That's one thing that you can't deny, that they're not just there for no reason. Surely. Surely the many of people that have died in the sake of astronomy and astrology and has gone through all kinds of things for knowledge and wisdom to tell the world. Surely it can't be made up. And so, war. Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. But I'm talking about this because this song was made famous in 1970. And at that time of this song was the Vietnam War. And so you can understand that this was a very literal, traditional war, that people were seeing people leave their home countries and people coming back, and they're not coming back the way they left. And so this song was more like, hey guys, wake up. This is not okay. What's the point of all of this? Why are we doing this? And so where we are in a different type of combat, let's call it that. Speaking of combat, isn't Mortal Kombat coming out? I feel like the themes of theatre and film are literally giving clues. Whether it's Wicked, whether it's the Avatar coming out soon, or Fire and Air, and because now technology has allowed for us to align a bit better with themes because back in the day, people would just kind of like to do futuristic things, what things will look like in 20, 50 years' time. Whereas now we can just be like, we can allude to whatever we're trying to speak to the people right now in this movie. And Mortal Kombat, that was very unprecedented. I was like, whoa, what's happening here? But anyway, I think if anything you take away, it's just the awareness of resets, and whether they are hard or soft. Yeah, I think that's it. So this song was written for the more very literal war that just didn't make any sense. And even in hindsight, it still doesn't make any sense. And now they've just started to improve. People's consciousness has widened, and we know we have to have a balance of everything in order to understand and learn things. And I think it's fair to say that we have definitely become desensitized or overstimulated with information and war and peace and dance routines, whatever it is, right? This is high. This overstimulation is very high. And so these quick resets probably make more sense, I guess. And also, another song, which was written by Sammy Hagar in 1977. He was writing a song to preempt the year 2027. And so I've written a bit here. It says, it's called The Crack in the World, which is very interesting because a lot of mythologies allude the world to be like an egg, or the cracked egg, or somebody's cracked the egg before it was fully able to form in its state to cause chaos and harm. And there's so many different other stories, but just 50 more years, we are all going to know why, where, when, and who's got to go. So let's all have a good time before the Great Divide, because things will start separating come 2025. Look at the subtle clues that won't make the news. And I left it there because you can go and have a look. Again, his name is Sammy Hagar. And the song is called Crack in the World. And it's very timely. To have a song that was 50 years ago, alluding to an idea that 2025 is going to be quite significant. Remember, the 70s is the hippie era, is the, peace and love, it's that era. And so for them to be at a space in time where they're saying 2025 is going to be very significant, and we are living that right now. And we're like, hey, Sammy, you're not wrong. And I like the part. It says why, where, when, and who's got to go. So let's all have a good time before the Great Divide. A lot of people allude the Great Divide to the divide of consciousness, because things will start separating come 2025. I would agree that it's about consciousness, but it could even be separation in a more physical sense, maybe with the earthquakes, or things shifting that doesn't look quite the same. Even with Jamaica, with their hurricane Melissa, like the landscape does not look the same anymore. Everything is changing. And so I'm thinking what else, because I think we're nearly, oh my gosh. All right. So lastly, let's look at 2026. And let's look at the main themes in 2026. So the main themes, or early 2026, Jupiter is going into Leo. So, we need Jupiter every single time. We need Jupiter to soften the blow for anything that's going to take place. Okay, remember what happened in 2020. Jupiter needed to be there because Pluto is going to mash up everything. So, also, we have Saturn and Neptune in Aries. If you haven't watched my Neptune video, have a look at it, because Neptune, as much as they like to call it foggy and confusing, I think that's more in its detrimental sense. I think right now, because Saturn and Neptune is going to be together, it's not going to be impulsive. Aries is going to be very structured as to where they're going to make changes. It's not just going to do whatever it wants. March 2020, there was a lot of things that were taking place, but Aries, you can go wild here. Okay, you can expose companies, these people, these ones over here. Yeah, you can do that. But now, 2026, nah. Yeah, Neptune, make sure that we create some steam, because this fire placement cannot do whatever it wants to do. And even though it's going into the house of Aries, it's going into its domain, it creates action with structure. So this is where, and not impulse, just because it's going to be directed energy. So then when we think of Neptune, we're thinking of dreams, we're thinking of imagination. This is really interesting, right? When we think of the great conjunction, the rules are Jupiter and Saturn. Here we've got Saturn and Neptune, which is ruled by Pisces, which is also shared by Jupiter. So it's closing in those similar themes, or something very significant about this is very, out of all of the ones, this, and I say Uranus in Gemini comes second. So this kind of Neptune is allowing us to feel things more on a deeper level, but extract information that maybe we wouldn't. This is why I was saying, like, we're learning things more and more quickly now, because we've done the full grunt of it in 2000 to 2012. So now, and then from 2012 to 2020, and so on and so on. So now we're here understanding more about what is that showing us. Oh, if Aries is not being impulsive, how are we going to navigate? We're going to have to think twice about a lot of things. This is not about anger. This is a sophisticated way of creating or enforcing new change. It's imaginative. Much like, again, with this idea of war, it's changed now. Oh, there's an added aspect to it. And so that's how I'm seeing Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And I look forward to seeing what takes place even at the beginning of it. When it gets into its even first degree, like, I'm very intrigued by it. Because you put imagination with Aries, is about action. Oh, you wanna create this? Okay, let's go. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it great. Aries, calm down. We just chill out. No, you said to be creative. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it with force. And then Saturn is like, well, as long as he's, drawing within the lines, I'm okay with that. I don't mind. Let me sit over here in my chair. I always allude Saturn to Grandpa as a grandpa with his little ham sandwich in his bag. So Uranus in Gemini. This, and I would say when we're thinking about discussion, when we're thinking about technology, when we're thinking about collaboration, when we're thinking about media, there is going to be, Uranus is unpredictable. It can do, I allude Uranus, if you see my Uranus video, Uranus to the Joker from Batman. Very unpredictable. And so because it's in Gemini, it's harmonious in that sense. And I would say that this Mercurian energy is heavily about communication. Heavily. And because Gemini is quick, they're witty, they're not here to, they already know things. Why are you trying to tell me stuff? I already know, like, stop it. So I wrote acceleration of information, things being not what they seem. This is definitely a very Gemini archetype of what you see is not what you get. And that even aligns with this kind of planet parade. Right, what you see is not what you get, and that keeps on coming around the president of United States a lot. So I think being aware and seeing what's happening would be very, very strong here. Right, there's a lot of awareness just because this is Mercury. This is about wit, cleverness, intelligence. This is about this heavily. So, and Gemini is not one, it's not, they like nice things. They like status. They like status a lot, right? It's almost like if you don't have the status, I'm not even talking to you because who are you? That's Gemini. And all sins will be forgiven. If they see that you started to acquire status, then immediately they will forget that they even spoken to you like that in the first place. Oh, hello. And I think that's not going to be any different here. Status, intellect, fastness, things are moving fast. Technology is going to be very strong at this time in 2026. I would even say languages. So tech and language as the new battleground. So people are, new battleground. Possibly a rise in health awareness, nervous system through tech. I only put that there because it was like Gemini rules the nerves, right? So that's going to play a big role in about how we are settling our nerves in this new time. So technology with health, and health in itself will take a big uprise because of that, to alleviate some of that tension. Then attention warfare and awareness being the solution. We already know that attention is being fought for in every which way, even right down to the biblical times. But who's going to take your attention? Who's governing your attention? And are you aware of what attention you're giving? Importantly. And I wrote there, Hollywood is scared of you streamers. I think I saw this on social media somewhere. But there is something changing. And again, status will trump. Status and intelligence will trump everything. And even the word Trump, it's just, everything is so symbolic. That man is so symbolic. I swear. Oh my gosh. And then, I'll speak more about Jupiter and Leo, but then we've got the trine. We've got Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus trine. And this is from 2026 to 2028. These are all outer planets. They are old school planets. They don't move very fast. And so this trine is almost, I see it as like the elders, or the elders almost okaying this new change. And they almost like giving good grace, like, okay, if you need anything, just let me know. But I think it's necessary, as long, yes, we're agreeing with the new change, but like, don't go too far, because we know that we have to keep an eye on Uranus, for example. And so the idea of consciousness, right, which Uranus kind of plays, the idea of communication in the mind, how that's being impacted. And that's in a trine with Neptune, which is already imaginative. And then we have Pluto, which it's a conspiracy theorist that will turn things over if it needs to. It's very, 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 very interesting times. And we can see that more of changes, but like just literally as a way to say, hey, we're here. This is the new change. We're here for it. But what do you want to do next? And I think I'll leave it at that. I think the last bit, Earth feels weakening. Yeah, I was alluding to Earth feels weakening with the song from Sammy Hagar called The Crack in the World. And at this weak point, there's always been a weak point in the Earth's atmosphere, and it's located near heavily in South America and a bit of like maybe even South Africa, and maybe a bit of West Africa and some parts of Canada. This idea that the field is weaker there, but then at the same time, 3i Atlas was literally noticed in that area at that time in South America, is very symbolic to me. and hopefully symbolic to you. And the idea of its name being Atlas, where we understand Atlas from a symbolic perspective, that it is the load-bearing point of the earth. And sometimes it's alluded to the part, I think they call it C1, where they call C1 on the vertebrae of the spine is the point where you can turn your neck left and right. This is the ball point of, or the axis or the load-bearing point for your head. And they allude this idea of Atlas, who's mythologically been seen as holding the world on his back, or is centered around that area of his neck, right? Or holding the world on his shoulders. This idea of this weak point could allude to idea of like this permeability, this area of recognizing things that haven't been recognized before, seeing things and learning things that haven't been seen before. And I just find that part so fascinating because that's actually happening, that there's a weak point in the sky. And they're watching it very heavily. And if there are any solar flares, that would be very, the atmosphere is still dense enough, but like still something to consider in this time where everything is happening so fast. Would this weak point get even weaker? What's going to happen, Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. If I haven't said anything, the notes are here. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this has given you yet another perspective of Three-Eye Atlas and what it could be providing us, along with this symbolic imagery of astrology in 2026 and even all the way back to year 2000. And it's a very exciting time. So stay aware. Definitely not woke. Go to sleep, everybody. And yeah, all the best. Take care.